Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Right, so it's been a while actually since I last put a video up, almost a month possibly by this time. So I guess a recap on the last video, and I was experimenting with ghost signs, and that was in relation to this upper level of industrial area. So I made a little bit of progress beyond the ghost sign at the end of that factory wall, and that was to begin a little bit of weathering. And then I kind of got sidetracked, and I would probably say quite literally. So as I was visualizing the new upper level of industrial area, I was at the same time considering how does that back scene continue on around the corner to the right. And it came into the area where there was the engine shed, and right at the end a little bit of an upper level street scene. And the more and more I looked at this area in its current state, with the Northlight engine shed, coaling stage and a little bit of yard space, I kind of felt I needed to think up a great plan to change this area and to tie it in much better with that new upper level industrial scene. So I think without further ado, let's just get into what I've actually been up to over this last month. So what is this great plan that I have in place for this particular area here? So it came from a comment some time back that the branch line that comes along here and ducks into what would be a hidden area, that this chap, and I can't remember his name, said why not have a terminus station here. So at the time I thought too much work, but what I'm actually thinking now is I am actually going to go ahead and try and do something here. And I think what really has spurred me on is this Northlight engine shed that was a Scale Scenes downloadable kit. It's kind of hidden here, and I do like how this came out, but it's unfortunate that it's in a location that's sort of difficult to view, and it really needs to be in a more prominent location, I believe. So we'll get on to where this engine shed is planning on going in the next segment, but the idea here is I'm literally going to take all of this out, so all of these buildings and the engine shed, the coaling stage, the whole lot is going to come out from in here. And what I'm planning on doing is here at the road level is having an upper level station that actually sits above the tracks. Now I found an example which I believe is in Liverpool, and it's St Michael's Street Station or St Michael's Station, and I'm going to base it off that, and I may actually scratch build a station very similar to that. So the idea is the street level is going to come out further, the overhead station will be on top with some steps that go down to platforms, and I'm going to actually make it so it's as if the tracks will actually continue on. So it won't actually be a terminus station. The idea is that the line carries on off into the distance, but in reality here on the layout it will be a terminus station, and there's enough length in here I think to have quite a number of 2-car DMUs and even the 121 bubble car, so I can actually position these in here. So it's going to mean quite a bit of alteration here. This coaling stage is going to go all together, which includes this elevated bit of track and so forth. This tunnel entrance that's over here for the main lines, I'm actually going to push the whole lot forward. So this has got a much larger sort of upper level area, and in doing that we can bring the tunnel entrance to where the track is actually straight, and I think that's going to work a lot better. So the other factor involved, of course, in doing this too is it means that the back scene here that we've got on this edge can continue along here as well at this upper level with industry buildings up behind. So yeah, I do think it's going to work, and this will be the sort of continuation of this back scene right up into this particular area, and also back scene up in behind here as well, behind these buildings. So there we have it. We'll move over to where these particular buildings are going to be relocated, and it's going to be a much more extensive engine shed and depot area. So I'm now standing where this added depot area is planning on going. So we have this track here which is just leading off into nothing, and the idea is that I'm going to extend this out and bring this out, and I can reduce the access hole here a little bit, and essentially this whole area here can become a additional depot area, and this is where I'll put the Northlight engine shed and the coaling stage. So there's a little bit of mapping out to do in terms of this. The plan for this actual access area was to have a lift out section that I could take on and off. Now I may still do that, although you get into complexities with aligning track and so forth, but of course it's completely achievable. So I could potentially add extra permanent baseboard to a certain amount of this that doesn't need to be lifted up, and then still have a hatch that is a much narrower section but still big enough for me, of course, to fit inside. So this is the plan for this whole area. But I think first things first, it is a case of getting into the other area down there where the plan is for this terminus station. So the first thing we had on the to-do list was, of course, to do a wee bit of demolition, and it's always a bit nervous when it comes to demolishing something that you have previously spent quite some time modelling, or thinking that you actually did a reasonably good job when you first built a certain area. So there were some aspects to this area that I did like. There was the retaining walls and the potential functionality of the yard area and so forth. Also quite liked how I'd worked up the coaling stage, and of course the elevated track and things like that as well. But it was a case of bite the bullet and start tearing the area up, and the idea was to simply replace the area of baseboard substrate with some fresh new MDF. So once I'd actually finished making a complete mess and it looking like a disaster zone, it was a case of working out the shape of the new baseboard substrate. And in these situations I just find it really easy to use a piece of cardboard from some old packaging or cardboard boxes, and I can get that fine-tuned to exactly what I need and then replicate that shape onto the MDF. So in the process of when I tore up the entire section, one of the other aspects that I thought I'd actually deal with at the same time, since everything had been cleared off, was to replace some of the mainline curves that passed through the original tunnel. And it was an opportunity for me to remove the only remaining second radius curves on the entire layout. So I upgraded the second to a third, and then the third to a fourth radius, and I think that will certainly help to improve the running of trains, particularly uphill trains on the incline. So with the realignment of these curves, you can probably just make out where the old curves used to be. So once I had secured the new MDF baseboard substrate into place and given it a base coat of a grey paint. It was a case of planning out the track alignment for the new branch line section. So based on the St Michael's station, it would be double track, but with one significant difference, and that would be the track alignment being on a beautiful sweeping curve that then entered into the tunnel entrance. So I thought the easiest way to achieve this beautiful sweeping curve was to use just a flexible type material that I could attach down to the layout and achieve a curve that sort of naturally flexed in its own direction. And I just actually used a bit of quite flexible fiberglass rod, which I just happened to have floating around in the garage, and I anchored that into place just temporarily using some track pins at each end, and for its own tension it sort of created this bowing curve, and that allowed me to mark that out on the baseboard, which I could then align the first section of track to. So once I got that first section of track down, then it was a case of marking out alignment for the other track, and using a technique that I'd actually used before, I just simply made up a very simple wooden MDF jig with a little notch in it that could hold the nib of pencil, and simply traced along the edge of the track that I'd already laid, and then of course that gave a perfectly equidistant line that I could align the second set of track to. And essentially at the same time, while I had worked out the alignment of the track, it was also a good time to consider the tunnel entrance as well. So what I've done in this situation is I've recycled the tunnel entrance that was on the main line, and this will become the entrance for which the upper level station building will actually sit on. Now this is a Hornby resin tunnel entrance, and it's similar in proportions and shape to the St Michael's station tunnel, but what I've actually done is, using a cardboard template, I've actually chopped the bottom off the tunnel entrance to lower the tunnel entrance, because I actually found the St Michael's station tunnel entrance was quite low in profile, so it was a case of getting something similar in that sense. So once I'd done that, then it was a case of just double checking the clearances to make sure that trains are still able to pass through the entrance. And what I've done here is just use some Mark 1 coaches, because they are actually longer and stick out more than the DMU sets that I have. So once I'd actually got a final position on the tunnel entrance, roughly its location, then I kind of leapt ahead a little bit. I'd slipped up on taking some footage and still photography, and moved ahead quite a bit with forming the steps that would lead up to the upper level station, and also forming the curved platforms as well. So as I built previous platforms, they are made up of 2mm MDF, which works really well, and it works particularly well in this situation because there's a reasonable amount of flex in the MDF to be able to do the curved sides. So the steps and the outer walls were done in a process that's very similar to the Scale Scenes downloadable kits, where the card is cut out first and then the brick paperwork or brick texture is applied over the top. So essentially this is where the computer came in very handy, and of course Illustrator and Photoshop and all of those software programs. So pretty much from here on in, the entire station was designed on the computer, and using some existing photographs and sort of roughly working out the dimensions actually of St Michael's station, and also working with the dimensions of the existing Hornby resin tunnel entrance, that I was able to determine some overall dimensions for the station and each of the different sections. So I had a little man that I used on the computer screen that sort of determined proportions, and I did a representation of the St Michael's station, so it's not an absolute identical station. I also actually completely reversed the station, so it's the opposite to what it is in reality. It was just because I wanted the two-storied part of the station to be towards the back of the layout and the single level portion to be at the front. So really the first place to begin was of course the platform and the steps, and I finally got round to making up a right angle jig. I've been meaning to make one of these up for quite some time now. They come in real handy when it comes to forming walls and other components that need to be set at 90 degrees. So of course this jig came in handy for forming the card steps that I needed, which is a very similar method to what Metcalfe use for their step components. So once I'd done that, of course it was a case of designing up the wall sections for the steps, and of course you could make out in various photos at St Michael's Station that there is some sort of room or utility space underneath the steps, and that appears to seem to have a series of windows in a row and a door. Now I wasn't going to go to that complexity, so what I used is the same proportions for the window as on the main station, just scaled down slightly, and a wee door. So it might imply that there is a utility space of some sort. So as I mentioned, all of the wall sections, including the stairs and all of the walls around the station building itself, were all designed up on the computer and laser cut out of 2mm card. The windows, as I've previously done, and this is sort of a new technique that I've started using with the help of a quick cutting machine to cut out vinyl for the windows. So once all the components had been designed up on the computer and everything had been cut out, it was a case of getting into the assembly of the main station building.
Thank you.
So I've temporarily placed the station on the upper level baseboard, and that level baseboard of course is just temporarily sitting there at the moment, and the back scenes and so forth are just made out of some corrugated cardboard at this stage, and it really just sort of helps visualize how this is actually all going to work. So I think the new scene here is certainly going to make a huge difference, and it's certainly going to help where we have the industrial area over this way now sort of is going to merge nicely around the corner, because I've now got those industrial buildings, this particular one here, on the same level, and we have the hidden siding is now below underneath, and I think it's definitely going to create quite an interesting street scene through here. Of course there's more buildings that I'd like to add into this area, and there will be a building sort of in here somewhere, and the idea is that will hide another handle, because potentially really what I'd like to be able to do here is this whole section will be another lift out section, so I can gain access to the track, plus also have easy access for wiring and lighting. So possibly some more buildings, low relief at this end here as well, and of course street lights and all of that type of modelling assets to add to the street. So the station building, it's coming together really nicely, and I'm quite happy with it. I have yet to do weathering of course on the actual station building itself. I have done weathering to the platforms and the stairs, plus also the tunnel. A little bit to my surprise, I was able to laser cut out these gable ends out of 1mm card, and although it is a simplified design from the actual real gable ends at St Michael's Station, it actually came out really well, so I was quite impressed with that. And along with the Metcalfe brick material, which was scanned and then obviously reprinted via the computer, I was also able to find some brick arches via Google and recolor those to suit the bands that also run around the brickwork. So in terms of hill formations, of course we've got this sort of area just in here which will be built up with condensed foam material and then carved and shaped, so that will make sort of light work of that area. And also here as well, I think rather than it just being a large flat area, that the hill actually will continue up here at some point, and that will be more foam material. We just take a wee view in through the street, and I think it's certainly going to make for some interesting scenes, and of course probably another level crossing. No, sorry, not a level crossing, a pedestrian crossing, and some pedestrian crossing beacons and things like that as well. Of course the issue that I have now is because of the amount of attention that I've actually put into the station, is this particular Metcalfe building here, which is actually an older kit, looks rather lackluster in detail. So I'm going to have to do a fair amount of work on this to kind of bring it up to this level, because it does look a little bit odd and out of place. So there will be a street or wee industrial access road to that side of the station in between there and this industrial building, and that will sort of run along the front and also continue and connect through. There is a archway here of course, which will be where the hidden siding goes, and that will be some more of the Metcalfe brick archwork, which of course comes from the viaduct kit. So one other thing that I've actually decided to do is move this signal box. Originally I had it down here, and of course there's a hole in the baseboard now where the wiring went, but I've decided to put it here because I think it's a much better location. It sort of ties in with the fact that this is really a junction now, quite a major sort of junction between the main lines running through here and this branch line that heads off into the distance somewhere. So I've found also that the angle now that the signal box faces sort of out to the more predominant viewing area, which certainly adds a little bit more interest, and of course you've got the lighting as well, which will show up more nicely in this position. So the two tunnel entrances here, that is a Metcalfe overhead bridge, which I've basically used the two opposing faces of the arches and flipped them out to the same side. I've had to do quite a bit of modification to this because we've kind of got two very subtle levels in the track, and so the arches aren't actually at the same height, but I think that is going to add a little bit of interest. Now, I haven't got any further with this. Of course, there's going to be buttresses, there is going to be upper walls, there is going to be weathering and all sorts, and then from this point here where the arch ends, there will be a retaining wall that runs along here and comes up towards the end of the platform about here, and you can just sort of make out that angle shape at the end as a rough sort of idea of the terrain that will actually follow around through there. So in essence, really, this branch line that runs through here will be as if it was built into a cutting. So this line here, which was really just a bit of spare extra storage area that I was using originally, I'm going to improvise and make out that this is possibly a branch industrial line. So maybe it goes to a colliery or something like that, because it sort of comes in to this sort of yard area and you've got a single road engine shed. So I'm kind of thinking maybe that going through that tunnel would lead to a colliery somewhere. So there we have it at this stage, and we now have the formings of a new area that I think is going to work a lot better in terms particularly of train operations with my DMUs and the wee bubble cars. And as I always sort of planned for this third branch line is to have some kind of back and forth control. So I think that'll actually work in really well for this particular scenario that I've now set up. So the upper level station building and all the steps and so forth I think have come together quite well, and the scratch built nature of this particular station I think adds a certain amount of interest to the area. So I know this video has been a long time coming, and I've had plenty of comments from the previous video, and unfortunately, as you may know, I just really haven't had the chance to actually dive in there and respond to people, and particularly those who've asked questions. Now I will endeavour to do that over the coming days and week, where I can respond to specific questions that people have actually asked. I guess the good old saying goes, time flies when you're having fun. So with being sidetracked by this new area and upper level station and also the upper level industrial area, I kind of feel like that whole pocket of the layout has kind of extended into a larger project, and I think I will keep that as one particular project, so I'm covering that entire area as it progresses, because they are interlinked in a lot of ways, and of course the back scene is also linked through and things like that. So I think in terms of the next video, it could be the remaining weathering to the upper level industrial area, or it could be some further work around this new station and the new street scene and any other bits relating to that area. And the hope is that the next video will come out a bit sooner than this one has. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you everyone for watching. I certainly do hope you're getting some good ideas and or inspiration from what I'm getting up to here at Station Road. So take care everyone, do look after yourselves, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.